Hello, hello. Hey, everyone. So good to see you this evening or this morning or this afternoon, wherever it is, whatever it is where you are. And we're so excited to get to bring this webinar to you called Life After Remote Learning, the One-to-One Classroom in 2021. I'm Matt Miller from Ditch That Textbook, and I'm joined by, to my right, Holly Clark from the Infused Classroom.
Yeah. And Cheryl, we're glad that you got here because I sent out links to everybody, but it's possible that maybe other people didn't get it. So,
Yeah, that's okay though. We've got lots of good stuff to share, whether you got a link or whether you're just kind of finding us one way or another. So in this, if you're joining us live, by the way, please do check in and let us know that you're here. Let us know who you are and where you're from and what you do and all of that good stuff. And in this webinar today, we're going to be talking about this very topic here, which I know is a very real and present topic for so many of us, life after remote learning. Even though some of us are still sort of dealing with remote learning or hybrid learning to some extent, but I know a lot of us are starting to come out of that to some degree. And we're trying to figure out kind of like what the one-to-one classroom in 2021 looks like. Because you know, Holly and I were talking about this, and we've heard of a bunch of folks that were just barely starting with one-to-one devices. You know, like each student has their own device before the pandemic hit. And then here comes the pandemic, and all of a sudden things are tricky and complicated, and we're trying to figure out how to integrate all of this stuff, and it's just kind of a big mess. But then other schools went one-to-one because of the pandemic, because they needed some sort of solution. And so here are these teachers and their students all have all of these brand new Chromebooks or laptops or whatever. And they're going, oh my goodness, what in the world do we do with this? So actually, we wanted to ask you that question real quick before we get too far into this is, what is your personal one-to-one experience? So if you're watching this live, let us know in a comment. Is your school one-to-one? How long has it been? And what kind of devices do you have? Because we know that everybody's had sort of different experiences with this, and we're curious to just kind of do a quick straw poll from everybody. But it really has been sort of a crash course on this one-to-one thing for a lot of people, hasn't it, Holly?
Yeah, it really has. And some people who were remote are kind of also thinking, how am I going to do the same things back face to face? And that's actually something not really to worry about. So we want to address that today too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it looks like somebody just got Chromebooks the past year. And that seems to be, at least in the US, what's happening. It's a huge amount of Chromebooks shipped out in the US.
Yeah, absolutely. I know, you know, there were a lot of schools that were using them before, and, you know, it kind of makes sense. They're, you know, quick to get on the web and integrate with Google Classroom easily and everything. I know a lot of schools are kind of going that way. We're still super curious to see what your experience is. If you're watching this, do go ahead and drop it in. Like Katie Cahill says, we're one-to-one iPads K through 5, and we've had them for about 5 years. So.
And I've worked with a lot of schools who are one-to-one iPads who've had them for many years. And even sometimes teachers in that school aren't really using it the way that you would hope after 5 years. And some are doing beautiful jobs. It's beautiful.
Right. Yep, absolutely. Here's one that says, our superintendent said the pandemic got the district caught up in the now. You know, I totally see that. It's like, you know, there's a little part of me that goes, well, if that's what it took, then, hey, at least you're in the now. And, you know, maybe that's what it took to, and I think a lot of people were like that, right? Like, you know, we hate that these were the circumstances that brought it around, but at least if it brought it around, then now maybe something will change to some extent. Oh, there's my friend Rachel Blackwell from Arkansas. Hey, Rachel. She says starting year 7 with Chromebooks one-to-one. Yeah. And I know from from Pulaski County Special School District where she works, there are some really, really cool things going on with those Chromebooks. So it's neat it's just really neat to see all the way, you know, across the spectrum, there are people using them in all sorts of different ways. There's Cheryl who says we have one-to-one Chromebooks on site in our tech center, but most of our client schools have one-to-one so we can keep working with students easily. So there you go. And Cheryl's from New Zealand, so that's not even a United States one. That's one from there. So very good. So that's kind of the scenario that we're going to be talking about in this webinar. Talking about, like we said earlier, life after remote learning, the one-to-one classroom in 2021. So no matter how those devices showed up at your school or school district, the fact is that in so many schools, they're there. We have them. The students have them in their hands. And a lot of times, teachers will have these devices come into the district and they'll go, okay, I've got all these Chromebooks. Now what in the world am I going to do with them? And so, Holly, what in the world are we going to do with all of those devices?
Well, even for people who have had them 7 years, it's what she knows is that we're trying to use them, not because they have a long battery life and because they start up quickly and because kids can use them offline and because all of these reasons. The reason school districts bought these is for the hope that we will use them to put students at the center of their learning. And that takes a little growth. That takes a little while to learn how to do that effectively. And so that will be some of the things that we talk about today. But the first thing we have to understand as we shift from this into this new world of having one-to-ones is that we need to understand what it means to be digital pedagogists. And we need to understand digital pedagogy. And what that means is that we all understand how learning happens, but now we need to understand how that happens in the digital world. And it's really the method and practice of teaching that takes into account, and this is really important, how the purposeful use of digital tools, and purposeful is key there, can increase student engagement, can empower student voice. And by this, I'm really talking about hearing from all of your kids and understanding where they are in the learning process. And then how these devices can help you create more meaningful learning experiences that put students at the center of their learning. And so that's some of the stuff that we need to understand. And Alice Keeler says this, and I love this: paperless is not a pedagogy. Just because we're putting something on Google Classroom doesn't make it pedagogical. It just makes it workflow. Yeah. It makes it less time at the copy machine. But it's not really about that's not a pedagogy. That's just the start of thinking, I think.
Yeah, no, I think you're totally right. I remember back to the days when I first went one-to-one, and it was desktop computers in my Spanish classroom. We had all of these old clunky desktop computers. They were almost like embedded into the desks in my classroom. And I remember I thought, oh man, I'm going to do such cool things. I'm going to do these like bell ringer activities right out the gate. And then we're going to do this and this and this. And then we're going to wrap things up this way. And I had like all of these ways to take what I wanted to do and just make them digital. And the problem at the time was my laptop computers were slow. Yeah. And so what was supposed to be a quick bell ringer activity ended up being this super long thing. And while I'm sitting there waiting for those computers to load up, I just kept thinking, boy, I could have done the same activity with paper. And this kind of like touches back to that same thing, that if the way that we deploy the technology doesn't change, then we might as well be doing it on paper. So just saying, oh, I want to use the technology isn't shifting the way that kids learn. So it's just like what Holly was saying. It's that digital pedagogy. You said it this way, Holly. I had to grab it in a banner and put it back up there. Mm-hmm. How does learning happen in the digital world? It's not like learning has changed because we have all of these devices now. It's how does it happen efficiently and effectively in the digital world? I think that's super important.
Mm-hmm. And so as we look at what a one-to-one classroom looks like in 2021, one of the things that, and the people in here who have had these iPads for 5 years, and Rachel, who's been in Arkansas with Chromebooks for a while, knows this at the core, that you can't leave out digital citizenship lessons. In fact, for me, I spent the first 5 days, I wasn't doing like, get to know you bell ringer activities. I was doing the first 5 days of digital citizenship. And here's an example of an Explore board. This is kind of another word for this is called a multimedia tech set, but I don't like to call it that because kids don't get super thrilled about multimedia tech sets. So this is an explore board where kids explore the idea of kindness and what does it mean to be kind. And then we take the lessons from that, and then we develop our own rules for what it's going to be like now that we're online together. What will it look like when we're on each other's Google Slides? How will we act when we're on a Jamboard together? And kids come up with those ideas and those guidelines that we're going to do as a class to make sure that we are kind online. We're even going to look at like what makes a good comment. What makes like if you're on Google Slides, is it appropriate to mess with someone's slide? It might be funny, haha, but is it? Or how do you feel? And so I spend time talking about that. And people ask me all the time in all of the trainings that I do, how do you kids not do like mess with each other's slides? And I always say it's because I spend the first 5 days talking about this. And while it feels like a lot, it's either I'm going to spend it up front or I'm going to spend it in taking a kid's Chromebook away or whatever might be the rules at that school. And I don't want to do that. Why would I want to take learning away from a child? Instead, I want to set it up correctly. And so it's just putting students and putting them in the center of their learning to develop their own acceptable use guidelines.
Yeah, I love that. And, you know, so many times I see adults interacting with each other on social media and I think, oh, they need a good digital citizenship lesson. You know, like we need to get them this multimedia tech set that Holly's showing us over here so they can learn how to be kind and how they can write an appropriate comment. But really, that's sort of what we're doing is we're laying that foundation for kids' lives, but we're also setting up the expectations, the expectations and the culture of the classroom of this is how we do our business and this is why. And kids have been bitten by this before a lot of times, and they know what it feels like whenever this doesn't go well. So when we're helping them get set up for success, a lot of times they appreciate that because they know what it feels like whenever it fails, and they don't like it any more than we do, you know.
And they understand. And we have some adults right now in the political arena who could have stand some of this digital citizenship work early on. But anyway, so let's keep going.
Yeah.
Talk about one of those other things that we should be. What does that one-to-one classroom look like? Well, first we're going to set the stage with digital citizenship. And our friends who are here right now who've had those devices will understand this as well.
Yes. Yeah. So I think a lot of times, you know, if we're continuing to talk about the one-to-one classroom in 2021, if we get those devices for the first time, you know, sometimes if we're not totally sure what to do with them, our use of our devices is sporadic. It's kind of hit and miss, you know. Some days we might come up with something cool that we're going to do, and then it might be a day or a few days or a week or maybe a couple of weeks before those devices come back out and they just sit in that Chromebook cart that you see on the screen, or they just, the kids bring them in and they're in that little tray under their desks or something. And then eventually those devices come back out. And then what happens? We've lost a little bit of our momentum. We've lost a little bit of, to borrow a term that Holly uses a lot of times, we've lost some of that fluency of being able to get those devices out and knowing how to get going and knowing exactly where to go. And so that's one of the things when it comes to this one-to-one classroom in 2021, you know, we really believe that consistency with the technology is important. So if it's going to be an important part of our classroom, an important part of our schools and of what we want to accomplish, we got to be using it. So even if it's for just little things, doing a little quick bell ringer activity, doing sort of a, jot ideas down, go do a little bit of quick impromptu internet research, like just on some of the little things, get students used to getting them out of the cart, getting them up on their desk, getting logged in, building that habit and being used to it so that we're not spending that time every time that we get it going again. It's almost like the old beaten down lawnmower in your garage, and it goes all throughout the winter and nobody uses it. And then in the spring, you turn that key and you hope that the engine turns over and you hope that the thing starts. It's kind of like that, where if you continually, my analogy kind of breaks down because here in Indiana, you don't want to use your lawnmower. Yeah, you don't want to use it in the winter. You really don't need to use it in the winter unless it's really strong and it has a snowplow on it. Yeah, but being consistent is one of those key things. So even if you find just little things, and what you'll also find a lot of times is if you find those little things and you get consistent with it, you start to get better with those and you start to find new things. And then all of a sudden it continues to support what you're doing in class.
Yep. And always having it open. I used to do it at a 45-degree angle so that's there ready. And if I didn't use it, oh, well, I didn't use it. I wanted it up and out and being there so that I didn't have to be like, everyone go get your Chromebook out of the cart. I never did that. So it's the same thing. The next thing that we really need to think about as we are having these one-to-one classrooms is that we need to let technology empower the cognitive research that we have now. So when I first started teaching, there wasn't a lot of cognitive research. In fact, it's been in the last decade that we've really started to look at how people learn, how they learn best. And so, like, here's an example. This comes from NeuroTeach, which is brain science and the future of education. But they say having students reconstruct what they know through alternative assessments leads to deeper understanding and consolidates learning in more powerful ways than traditional testing. What they mean by consolidates learning is it makes it stick. It keeps it with you. And it consolidates it in your brain so you can bring it back up again. And when we were not with technology, that might look like making a diorama or something, because that might be a project that you have to think about. Why would I get these things in this diorama? But we don't have to do that now. We can do creative projects and kids can demonstrate their knowledge using these things or these devices. And they can do it with like Canva. They can do it with Adobe Spark. They can put it in Book Creator. There's all of these great learning tools that empower this research that we know works. And it's like this. I like to use this example. When people get technology, they really, like, first thing they want to do is take what they were doing and put it into a Google form. Nothing's wrong with doing that. But here's how we empower that. We take it from the Google form, or it's in the Google form, and then kids go to Flipgrid and they record everything they learned about that unit that wasn't on that Google form test. And now we've empowered it by having recall and having kids think deeper about their learning. So those are ways that we can do that in these classrooms. And let me just go to the next one. And I love this because in this book, NeuroTeach, which I use a lot in thinking about teaching, it says there's an unconscionable list of things teachers should never do again. And at the number one position is pop quizzes for a grade. And there's reasons behind that. It's not that pop quizzes themselves are bad, but they cause kids anxiety. It's a big problem in society right now. Having a kid tell you, like, right now what they know, is that beneficial? Not really. So instead of pop quizzes, most of the time people do pop quizzes because they want to make sure kids did their homework. Like if I'm reading chapters 2 through 4, I want to know that kids read it. So instead of pop quizzes, maybe have kids go to Flipgrid and tell you everything that chapter 2, 3, and 4 were about. It's less stress. They can do it in their own time. They might even do it later. But we take out that anxiety part. And also, the reason we have formative assessments is to form memory. It's also to inform us where students are, but it's really for students to form their memory, to start to put that stuff into memory. And we get confused with that with formative assessments. So pop quizzes don't really put stuff into memory.
Right. I totally agree with that. I'm reaching for a book, by the way. What you were just describing about students being able to recall things from their memory so that it builds that long-term memory is this thing called retrieval. It's something that actually one of my favorite books here is Powerful Teaching by Pooja Agarwal and Patrice Bain. And this has got an awful lot about that very practice. And it's just the simple idea of learning and practicing learning by recalling things out of your brain instead of rereading the notes, rereading the material, trying to cram it into your brain. And one of the practices that they mention in here that is backed up by research, probably similar research to what you see on the screen over there, is that ungraded recall activities are what lead to long-term learning, low stakes or no stakes. And so, there's an awful lot to that. So I'm with Holly when she says, let technology empower cognitive research. If the cognitive research in this case says, let kids do free recall, how could we have them do that? Well, like you were saying, have them record it on a Flipgrid video, have them dump everything that they can in a brain dump in a Google Doc, or, the technology can back all of that stuff up. Before we move on, we got a really good question from Katie. And she says, and I think this really speaks to what we were talking about earlier with digital citizenship and laying the groundwork and everything. She says, I've always said to get the first few days or weeks should be devoted to getting to know students and classroom routines down before introducing technology to the class. And I've been closed down by admin of my opinion. Am I off base? I would tell you, I love that idea of using those first few days and weeks to get to know the students and to get to know classroom routines. Holly was talking about this. I love the analogy of building a house. And of course, you have to pour the concrete on that foundation and get that set, or otherwise the entire house is going to crumble. And so I'm one who wants to build those relationships and get those routines down. And for me personally, technology plays a part in that, especially with the classroom routines. It's like what Holly said. For me in my own high school Spanish class, part of class was every day before the bell rings, students are coming in, and on their way to their seat, they go to the Chromebook cart. They find the number Chromebook that they're supposed to have. They bring it out, set it down on their desk, open it up, and get logged into Google Classroom every single day. And so that was part of the routine. So I don't see routines and relationships being mutually exclusive from technology. I think they kind of play together.
I think they're empowered by technology. And like for us, for example, Google Classroom is part of the routine. I've got to get kids used to what that looks like and to go to it. And so for me, I'm with Matt on that. Doesn't mean that what you're doing is not right. It just means just something to think about. Pour yourself a glass of wine on Friday and have a talk with yourself or your friend.
There you go.
That I would want to unpack with a friend. Like, let's really talk about this. But if you were talking with me, I'd be probably with Matt on that a little bit. And then we also want to, as we have these one-to-one and we are trying to go deeper, even if we've had them for 5 to 7 years, is that we want to use technology now to go beyond text-based only answers. And what I mean by that is we're really, so I'll just give an example. Back in the day, before I was using technology, which for me was like in the 90s, because I got my first one-to-one classroom in the year 2000, but I would have kids write like 3 things they learned today in an exit ticket, and I would have them write it on a piece of paper and then fold it up or turn it upside down and pass it to the end of the row, because I was teaching in rows because I thought that's what I had to do because I taught older kids. And I would grab those, I would take them home, grade them, or look at them, and then pass them back, or maybe not pass them back. But the kids weren't able to hear and learn from each other in that way. And so when we get out of text-only answers, we allow kids to talk about their learning, and that talking about it has this cognitive struggle that allows it to stick. And so it's really important that we allow for this non-text answers as well. And it's something that I call, and I don't know if I talk more about this in the next slides, but it's something I call, press record. And Matt,
I knew it was coming. I had a banner ready.
Yeah. I don't know why you don't have t-shirts, maybe someday or whatever, but we're getting kids ready for the workforce. We might think we're getting them ready to be like, I teach language arts and social studies, like to be a historian, but I'm not. I'm getting them ready to have a job someday. Sorry. I know you might love your subject, and I do too. But what they need to be able to do is sit across a Zoom screen or a table from someone and explain in their own words why they're the best person for that job. And they're not going to get there when we're having everything be answered in text-based answers, because they're not going to sit and have the person say, so why do you want this job? hold on, let me just construct my sentence, and then pass it over to you. That's not going to happen. And we're also in this world where we're having conversations on Instagram lives and TikToks and all of these things. And you need to be able to articulate yourself well doing that. And I just watched this video on Facebook. In fact, there was this little girl. She was so funny. They were doing these things. They were singing a song, and it was kindergartners. And there was this one kid, and it was the saddest thing. That's what I focused in on. There was a kid next to her, and she had a teddy bear covering her face the whole time. She didn't move because they were on stage, and she was so horrified and full of anxiety. All I could think about is, why did the adults let that happen? But also, this little girl's shy, and she needs an opportunity to talk about her learning in an environment that doesn't cause her anxiety, which might be her own Flipgrid, where only it's her and the teacher see it, until she gets the strength and her anxiety gets less. And maybe in second or third grade, she can do the class Flipgrid. But we have kids with that kind of anxiety, and we need to help them, because she's not going to be able to sit there like this at a job interview or a college entrance interview. And so we've got to help those little kids get over that anxiety. I couldn't believe it. Everyone was focusing in on the Melissa McCarthy little 5-year-old, and I was looking at that poor little girl. And there was boys standing there. I don't know if you guys have seen this video. It's on Facebook, and little boys were not taking part in this little thing. It was funny to watch all of these things happening that we need to pay attention to. Anyway, so going beyond those text-based answers always, because now we have the tools to do it with Flipgrid, Screencastify, Book Creator has recording options. We have all of these things that we can do.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I'm going to let you start to talk about this, and I'm going to bring up some examples over here while you do that.
Okay. Yeah. So, the next thing we were going to talk about was making small upgrades. See, we've been talking, like we said earlier, we've been talking about the one-to-one classroom in 2021. We've talked about digital pedagogy. We've talked about digital citizenship. We've talked about consistency, about letting technology empower the research, going beyond text only. So these are some of the things that the one-to-one classroom can kind of look like. And then this one I wanted to touch on. Make small digital upgrades is what this one is. And the idea behind this is that I think sometimes we come into a one-to-one classroom, a one-to-one environment, and teachers are like, again, what do I do with all of these Chromebooks? What do I do with all of these laptops? What do I do with all these iPads? And maybe a place to start is to take something that works already and give it a digital upgrade, make small digital upgrades, like we said. So let me give you an example. And then I think Holly's going to show you some examples as well. But let's just go in general with something that a lot of us as teachers have had some sort of experience with. And that would be the poster project. We've probably all done a poster project at some point, right? And so if you think about what the poster project entails, it means you get a topic, you come up with some visuals, you come up with some text, and you put them all in a presentation that you can hang up on the wall. That's a poster project, right? So an easy way to start to integrate that technology is, let's kind of start at the substitution level. Let's substitute that poster over into a digital version of it. I think sometimes the substitution level gets a bad rap, but you got to start somewhere,
Yeah.
But yeah. But as soon as you get that start, you start to see that you can upgrade this activity pretty quickly. For instance, in a regular old poster project, you might have in years past gone down to the library to get a whole bunch of magazines so that you could cut pictures out of them and glue them to your poster, right? Which was always rough on me, because I got to pick through magazines and I ended up with 1973 editions of National Geographic. There's not a whole lot you want to use for your poster on that, but that was all that I was left with. But nowadays, if you do a digital poster on a tool like Google Slides or Google Drawings or something, you've got all of the web potentially to go find images. You've got a whole bunch of different fonts. Those are like small upgrades, right? But let's even go a step further than that. We can do hyperlinks. We can do links to other things out on the web. So for instance, if we're doing a poster project about dolphins, you could very easily find a good article or an encyclopedia entry about dolphins, link to it off of your poster. And now all of a sudden you have a clickable interactive poster. It's an upgrade. This is what Holly was doing. I feel like whenever you have a lesson that you do in the real world, if you port it over into the digital world, the question you should ask yourself is, can it take it at the level that it is and just upgrade it a little bit? Just bump it a little bit higher. Can it do that? So in that case, we're adding an interactive layer to it for the people that look at it. Now, boop, there's a little upgrade. What if one of those links goes to a YouTube video where you can see dolphins in motion, something you can't do with a paper poster? Boop, there we go again. What if we link to audio where we get to hear dolphin communication? What if we leave a spot where, or we don't actually hit the present button and we leave it kind of in edit mode and people can leave us comments answering a question? It's like all of these little upgrades. Now, all of a sudden we've taken what felt like a traditional activity and we've given it all of these upgrades. And now it's something a little more transformative than what we had before. So all of those little digital upgrades, you just start with one and now you're even better off than what you were with the regular paper activity, right?
Yeah, and some people were mentioning ThingLink, which is awesome for that. And I love ThingLink, and so does Matt. And I like to say this: you get up here, Matt, you get to here, and then I say you need to take your fist because you have a mic in it and you're about to drop it. Because now with that digital upgrade, you have a kid record on Flipgrid, putting that poster, a picture of it right on the screen, and say exactly what they were thinking. The reason I put in the sounds is because I wanted whatever, and I chose the picture of this because. And I get to hear the thought process behind why they chose the things that they did, something I could not do before technology. And that to me is when you're like a master teacher and you can drop the mic and be like, look what I did. I had them do all these things. I'd have them do it in something like Canva. And then I have them explain to me their thinking behind that. Like this is substitution. And this is inside of like an app I just think every teacher should be using, but they hear the app's name is Book Creator and they think it's about creating books, and it's not. It's so much more. It's about creating all kinds of things, and so easy and great for kids. And in this one, I'm just doing an acrostic poem, and I have an example to show kids what I'm thinking that they should put in this. But in that acrostic poem, which is just substitution, it's paperless, not a pedagogy. But when I use this record button, you'll see a sound icon there, because that's where they recorded and told me, instead of just the things they're going to put about August in the acrostic poem, everything else they learned about August, because this is from the book Wonder. From that chapter. And those of you who have read Wonder know that we hear the story from the differing viewpoints of the characters in the story. And so now I want to hear everything August that you know about August. And so I've just added an upgrade. That's a digital upgrade. It's like the perfect digital upgrade. And here's an example of one in a Jamboard where I'm teaching kids the story elements. And so these are some example stories we're looking at. And I have them look at, even though this story is only about 325 words, it still has all of the components of a story plot. So they come in here to Jamboard. And I was using this as an example the other day. So this is why it says Dan and his wife. But I click on this and then I can tell, this was supposed to say, it was supposed to say characters. And I can click on these as students and put the characters that were in the story, because those two stories, even though they're small, have characters. They have a setting. They have a conflict. They have a rising action. They have a turning point. They have everything that's in a storyline. And then they're going through and they can go look at the other students, because there's other ones here. They can see what the other students are saying. And they can go, oh yeah, the setting is New York City. I was thinking it was New York, but it's actually New York City, and they learn from each other. And so this is just a little digital upgrade because they're inside of something working together. And I know you love Jamboard too. So
yes, absolutely. Yeah, these are great examples. And like you said, this is, these are examples of little digital upgrades. Like we don't have to go great big on this, do we? So let's go on. Let's go on to that. Where we going? Yeah. Is this where we're?
So we had that assessment thing. I'm just going to skip past it because we're going to give everyone the slides after the show. And so they can go look. I had a little poster here about digital assessments, when you would use them and why, because those are kind of upgrades. Like instead of just having slides, having a Pear Deck or a Nearpod, things like that. But let's go to this next one where we talk about scaffolding your new tech integration. And I see a lot about choice boards, and sometimes I love the choice boards, and sometimes I get a little anxiety because I'm like, students don't know how to do that. If we tell them, and this particular one that you see here is by a woman named Amanda Sandoval. She's out of Orange County, California. She's amazing. And I took her choice board, as we do with all kinds of things. And if you clicked on it, you'd see where I said, created by Amanda Sandoval, redone by Holly Clark. But I took her example and I was working with some teachers, and I said, if you're going to have them create an infographic, make a little tutorial about how to do that and add that there so that kids understand. You can't just be like, go make an infographic. Do you even know what that is? So we have to scaffold this technology and these choices that we give them. In fact, I'm not really giving a lot of choices until like October or November, when I've showed them how to make an infographic. And we've talked and unpacked what a good infographic is. But if I don't have time, I can make a video, but I still like to unpack these things. But so you can choose to create an infographic, a digital poster, or a photo bento, which I love that idea. But then I have added at the end, no matter what you choose, I want you to go to Flipgrid and want you to explain your thinking behind what you did. And this is often, and I've said this 5 times now, this is often what's left out, is hearing from students why. Why did you choose? What was your learning journey like? What would you do different? What would you keep if you could do it again? And I think we need to hear that stuff.
Yes, absolutely. So let's go on down to the LMS slide, which is coming up right after this one. There we go. So as we continue to kind of work our way down through the one-to-one classroom in 2021, like I was saying earlier, we've covered a lot about digital pedagogy, laying the foundation with digital citizenship, consistently using the technology, going beyond the text-only answers, the small upgrades. And now we come into another big part of that one-to-one classroom in 2021, and it's the learning management system. And, when we're talking about learning management systems, a lot of times we're talking about things like Google Classroom, which isn't a full-fledged learning management system, but it's kind of the same idea. We're talking about Canvas. We're talking about Schoology. We're talking about Microsoft Teams, Blackboard. I mean, there's all sorts of them. And a lot of times there's a lot of professional development around these learning management systems. How to use your learning management system. How do you create an assignment? What do all the buttons do? How do students get logged in? And all of a sudden, what happens is we start to see classroom technology through the lens of the learning management system. And I can tell when that's happening when people ask me a question like this. They'll say, do you have any good Google Classroom assignments that I can use? And when I hear that, I totally get where they're coming from on that, because they're using Google Classroom to assign those assignments. But I start to realize that there's a little bit of a disconnect here between the learning management system and what the learning looks like. And so to kind of clear that up, since the learning management system is a big part of one-to-one in 2021, I love to make this analogy to kind of clarify it a little bit. So let me ask you this. Holly, I'll ask you, since you're the one on camera with me. If you're thinking of a bucket list vacation, I know you go big on your bucket list vacations. You've got an incredible travel imagination. You have big dreams. So just pick one place, just one place. If you could go anywhere in the world that you were excited about, just pick one off the top of your head. What would it be? Spain. Oh, I would totally go to Spain. That's on my bucket list too. So I want you to picture that vacation in your mind. If you're watching this, I want you to do the same thing. Pick out that place and just take a second and picture it in your mind. Like what it would look like. Picture yourself in it. Picture the, whatever that vacation looks like. Okay. Hopefully you got it at this point. Holly, I'll ask you the question, but I'm also asking you if you're watching this. When you were picturing that vacation, did you picture the airport?
No.
You weren't dreaming of the airport?
No. Please,
In fact,
no.
with some of us, that's the least favorite part of the vacation, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the airport is a lot like the learning management system, because you see, the airport for our vacation is the means to an end. It's the way that we get to where we want to go. Google Classroom, Canvas, Schoology, Blackboard, Microsoft Teams, all of those learning management systems are the way to get to the assignment.
Yeah.
It's like Grand Central Station. You know, they've got trains coming and going. It's like the airport. You got planes coming and going. But we're looking for the destination. Where is the learning going to happen? And the learning management system gets you there. So really, we're not talking about Google Classroom assignments. We're talking about digital assignments that let our students write. We're talking about digital assignments that let our students explore and then tell others about it. And so we start to create all of those things with different places around the web, like using Adobe Spark to create a little video or an image, or using Screencastify to record a video recording, or using Google Slides to create some images to show what we've learned. Those are the destinations. Those are the bucket list vacations where the learning happens. And Google Classroom is the way to get there. So whenever we start to see our learning management system not as the be all end all, but the way to get to the good stuff, then it really starts to empower us, and it starts to open our mind to everything that's available, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also we have to think outside of the LMS too, because when we have those, we're behind a wall. And so when kids turn in work, they don't see each other's work. And that's kind of reminiscent of this 1996 classroom I was talking about, where kids turned in work. I took it home in my bag. You can't see it. And I'm going to grade it and pass it back to you. And no one's going to see each other's work. And so we want to be really cognizant in 2021 that kids see each other's work as well. So sometimes, even though they're turning it in Google Classroom for the grade, possibly, or Canvas for the grade, we also have them turn it in on something like a Padlet, where they could see each other's responses, answers, projects, whatever it is. So we have to think outside of that, because if you think of your LMS, I hear this a lot, like, oh, I'll ask districts that I'm working with, so tell me about your teachers and their technology integration. They're like, oh, they're really good on Google Classroom. And I hate saying this to the people, but I say, that's not technology integration. That's workflow. And so when I'm talking technology integration, I'm talking about empowering learners and the learning experience. This is just getting, like you said, to that experience. So you're right, Matt.
Yeah. Yeah. So when it comes to all of this stuff, you know, we've gone through all of these different parts of the one-to-one classroom in 2021, and kind of getting our brains straight on this and making the most of it, and really empowering kids to do meaningful learning. I don't know if you can tell, but this is our jam. You know, this is like what gets Holly and I out of bed every morning. We love looking at the research behind this stuff. We love seeing what teachers are doing with it, and we love helping teachers to be able to do it in a manageable way, in a way that doesn't take a bunch of time, that they can totally do with their students. And so Holly and I have been brainstorming about ways that we can be around to help teachers do that in a more powerful way. And we wanted to share with you, like, if you've seen these ideas so far and you're digging this and you're kind of like, man, I wish I had somebody who could support me in this work all year round, then we've got something that we wanted to tell you about. So Holly and I have been working on this project. Do you want to flip to the slide, Holly? We've been working on this project called The Drive. You've probably seen things all over the screen about The Drive so far, but The Drive is this membership program that we've started up, where teachers can join in this community where they're able to get these resources that empower this kind of work. And you get to do it side by side with Holly and I, basically all throughout the school year. So we're able to work side by side and support you in this work, helping to grow your practice, doing all of the nerdy research for you so that you can get it in little manageable bite-sized pieces and seeing how it applies in the classroom. And so we want to tell you just a little bit about what the drive is and what's inside of it, because if you've been digging the stuff that we've talked about so far, you may want to check this out, because this is the exact kind of thing that we do like day in and day out inside of the drive. So let's go ahead and go to that next slide. And so here are some of the things that you get if you decide that you wanted to check this out and try it. For one, we create these downloadable resources that you can't get anyplace else. Probably our favorite thing out of all of them are the research cheat sheets. Yeah. Actually, I saw Linda Edwards pop in here. I want to ask Linda about the research cheat sheets, because she was in on an early group that kind of tested out the drive and wanted to see what she thinks of them. So Linda, if you're hearing this and you have any feedback, drop that in a comment. I'm curious to see. But basically, Holly and I dig into all of the nerdy research and learn everything that we can about it. And then we give it to you in a teeny tiny, neat little PDF document. So you get all of the basics and how to apply them. We also do lesson ideas. We do tech tools, suggestions on how to use technology tools, all of these resources that you can go plug into your class. But what's cool about that is that, yeah, those resources are available whenever you want them. But sometimes it's nice for someone to kind of like tell you what's in them.
Yeah.
And explain them to you, right? That's the daily audio shows part over here. See, what Holly and I do, it almost feels like a little short daily podcast. We record these little messages for you, and we intend for you to listen to them maybe on your way to school, on your way home from school. And it's almost like me and Holly sitting in the car with you, or sitting on the train with you, or walking to school with you, and just kind of telling you some of the stuff that we've been learning about and stuff that you need to know about these topics. And those little video, audio podcast episodes almost are available Monday through Friday. You know, so basically every time that you commute to school, you can have Holly and I kind of ride along with you. And we're getting some comments about those cheat sheets. I didn't realize Petra was in here. That's awesome. She says the cheat sheets were great. Cheryl too, loved the resources and ideas you post in May. Yeah, so any of that stuff. Linda even says, love the cheat sheets, also the podcast. It felt like starting my day talking to you both, right? And
I loved the podcast. That was their favorite thing. The little 5 minutes of here's what we're going to talk about this week. Yeah.
Yeah. And see, in those podcasts you get, in those little audio shows, you get me and Holly, but it's not enough to just hear from us, because you see, we're going to have in the drive, we're going to have hundreds of educators from all around the United States and all around the world who have their own experiences and ideas too. So that's where you get to the third piece of this, which is the passionate community. Yeah. We have a Facebook group that's a private Facebook group just for the people that's involved in the membership. And so there we get to ask questions that all of you get to respond to. And so the brilliance is in the group, right? The brilliance is getting to see everybody's answers, everybody's experience, the dialogue that happens, and you get to be a part of that too. And then the best part for me on that is that we pull little things from those Facebook conversations and we insert them into the audio shows. So then your comments end up on those podcasts, on those little audio shows. Sometimes we even pull some of that stuff and make the downloadable resources based on what you all are saying. So really, the drive is kind of all about you. So that's kind of like the drive in a nutshell, right, Holly?
Yeah, and it's about, and it kind of has a double meaning, like those teachers who are really driven to do this technology and this pedagogy thing right, and don't want to have to go do all of the work. We're doing it for you. In fact, I'm making a research sheet right now for digital citizenship, and I'm like loving it. I didn't even want to come and do the show because I was like all into it. I mean, I wanted to do the show, but like I love that research piece, and it's what drives me. And
yes.
hopefully will drive you.
Yeah. And we also talk about how the drive, have you noticed how with the audio shows, we say they're kind of intended for you to listen to on your way to work, on your way to school or home from school. That's kind of the double meaning of the drive too. It's like, our slogan down at the bottom there, teachers thrive on the drive. As you're driving into school, you got that time, make your commute your teaching superpower, right? Like you've got that time on the way to school where you could listen to something for just a little bit. We just give you that little nugget, that little idea, that little piece of inspiration that you need for your day. And you get that little bit kind of all throughout. And then Cheryl was saying the daily podcasts were great and were motivating. I love that the resources were all in one place and I didn't have to go surfing all over the place on the net. That is kind of the nice part, is that it's all right there. And so
and I said that I'm in 2 memberships myself. And like all the time people are talking about things. I'm like, where's that at? I don't know. And it's because they don't have that daily podcast that tells you, okay, here's what we put in today. Here's what we're going to be doing, so that it keeps you up to date with the things that are inside of this membership site.
Right. Exactly. And so we just got this question. This is kind of the key question at this point, isn't it? She goes, where can I find the cheat sheets? Sorry, I just joined a few minutes ago. So I think the bigger question that we're asking is, if the cheat sheets and the downloadable resources and the daily audio shows are all part of the drive, the big question at this point is, how do I join the drive, right? Like, how can I become a member of it? And so it's really simple. I'm going to drop the link into the comments right here. And so the easiest way to do it is just to go to, the website is thedrive.online. In fact, I'll put it in a banner right here. Thedrive.online is our website. And so if you go there, there's going to be a button that you can use to register and to get a whole bunch more details about it. There are ways that you can join it monthly so that, you can kind of go month to month, or if you want to be able to save a little bit on it, there's a yearly option where you can end up spending, over the course of all of the months, you end up spending less and less. But either option is going to get you involved so that you can be part of all of it. It's almost like having Holly and I as your personal tech and instructional coach. If you could stand to have a little bit of extra support, somebody to maybe help make you some resources every once in a while, or to give you some advice or ideas. It's almost like having that glorious teacher community that you always wish that you had. With a couple of familiar faces to give you ideas on the way to school. If that is the kind of support that you could use during this school year, then maybe the drive is for you. So we encourage you to go check out thedrive.online and then check out that link and see if that's something that you want to do.
And we'll start in September because we don't want to overwhelm you in August when you're just getting your feet wet and getting those routines and things. And we're going to start with classroom culture, looking at digital citizenship, looking at building relationships and how to really improve your LMS, like what you do inside of that for that first month. And then we're going to go into a bunch of different things that will really improve your teaching this year. And Matt and I are like the most excited about this because here's what we have. Our job is like, we go to a school district. I just went to one and I met these fabulous teachers and I loved them. And we had these great conversations and I was like, okay, bye.
Yeah.
Okay. It's great knowing you. And I might get a few messages on Twitter after, Instagram or something, but that was it. And this gives us the opportunity to have like a community that we can keep growing together. And we don't have to be like, peace out. That was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now,
Exactly. The other thing I wanted to mention too, as we kind of wrap this up, and by the way, if you have questions about the drive, if you just want us to be able to answer them real quick while we're here as we wrap this up, go drop those in the comments. We're happy to answer any questions. But one of the things that I'm excited about too is that, you can join this as an individual person. And we're excited, if any of you decide that you want to do this, but it's also an opportunity for schools and school districts too. If you'd like to have that, if you're in charge of instructional technology, or if you're a tech coach, or if you're a principal of a school, or you're a curriculum director and you'd like to have lots of your teachers have access to this resource, then we have set you up with a plan that fits your school. So it doesn't just have to be a one-off thing. We have great opportunities for entire schools and school districts to be able to join too. So if that's your thing, if that's your role, and you'd like some more information on that, just email us personally, and we'll be happy to help you out with that.
And we had hundreds of educators we had like a VIP launch of people to try it out. And we had hundreds of educators in that, and we had 15 different countries. And I think there might have even been up to 22. I think I stopped counting and meant to go back. So that was awesome. I love that there were educators from around the world, because if I were teaching in San Diego and grew up in San Diego and went to school in San Diego, I wouldn't know what other people are doing in these other spots. And I love knowing that.
Absolutely. So I think that's probably a good place for us to wrap up there. So definitely go check it out at thedrive.online. And then, if that's something that you're interested in, we would love to welcome you into the membership. We can't wait to see.
But it closes.
That's right. That's right. Because it only hangs around until I think September 2nd is the last day. So this isn't one of those things where it's just always open. We kind of open the doors at once so that we can get to know our members and we can build that community. If we people kind of come in and go in all the time, you lose out on that. So our fall cohort, so to speak, is going to close on September 2nd. So now is the time to be able to jump in and not miss out on that. So if you've got any questions at all, feel free to reach out to us on social media. Feel free to email us and we can help you out. So any last minute words before we wrap up?
Looks like no.
Yeah. All right. Wonderful. Well, we've had a blast hanging out with all of you, whether you end up becoming members of the Drive or not. Hopefully you've gotten some useful stuff related to one-to-one classrooms in 2021. And we look forward to seeing you at some point, either out on social media or on one of our websites or a video or something. So thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Take care.